So we're doing Krisis today. So what is Krisis about, right? Let me just turn that off. Krisis is, oh, we've got to do our mind map first. So this is basically your headings for your mind map, right? So I've just structured a couple of headings that essentially you would need on your mind map so that it includes everything that you need to know. So you can study directly from a mind map if you decide to make one. I've put the English there for you so that you know how what each of the words are. However, I would advise that you know your Afrikaans words as well. That's why I've put. Now let's get into the summary. What exactly is this poem about? So Krisis is a conversation that is happening between the heart and the intellect, right? But I need you to note down that the speaker is actually the intellect, so that's the mind, right? And the heart is being addressed secondary. The heart is sort of just listening, and the intellect is speaking. And what's happening is there's a little battle happening between whether the heart or the intellect should be listened to. So the speaker is female, and she's deciding to now listen to her intellect instead of her heart because she felt that her heart had led her astray. And throughout the entire poem, basically the intellect and the heart is being compared, which is an allegory, obviously. So they're being compared as to what do you think is the more rational route to take. And obviously the speaker is biased towards the intellect because previously the speaker had listened to the heart. Once again, just to reiterate, the speaker is female, right? Now, if you look at the structure of this little slide over here, I've got the English in yellow and the Afrikaans in white. So it's going to be this way throughout the presentation. And I'm actually going to show you how the woordeskat is going to work. So you now have your exam pad ready in front of you to start adding to your woordeskat. Now, if we look at this, what words would we need from here? To answer a question about what the poem is about, first thing we would need is, let me just grab my pen. We will choose a different color, right? Okay, so we need the word for emotions, first of all. There we go. Okay, so emotions. Now, if you look at the bottom, you'll find the translation there as well. I'm going to highlight it for you. But if there's other words you want to take down, then of course you can definitely do that. Okay, so emotions, emoties. This is how I want you to see in terms of building a woordeskat. Take down whichever words you feel you don't know well. Even if you sort of knew it, but you forgot it, take it down. You'd rather have a woordeskat that's way too long than a woordeskat that's way too short. Then we want the word for allegory, right? Because that is what is happening throughout the poem. There's a comparison happening between the heart and the intellect at any given time. Okay, then let's see, what else would we need? We would need compared, which is vergelyk, right? I'm hoping that you guys are seeing how to use it, right? Because I'll just say this now, but then after this, I'm just going to be highlighting the words and you can then just go ahead and add it. And then what else would we need? Struggle. Sometimes it's the basic words that just mess up our answers, so it's better to just take them down. Struggle, so that you can say it's a struggle between the heart. Let's add between, just for just. You can never have too many woordeskat words. Okay, and then, yeah, I think that's it. Right, so just to recap, what is the poem about? It's basically just a little struggle between the heart and the intellect. The intellect is talking, the intellect is female, and the speaker is biased in terms of taking decisions with their heart. They are now preferring to take decisions with the head or with the intellect, right? Okay. Let's actually add the word for intellect as well. Intellect or reason, which is verstand. Okay. Now, throughout, if we're going a bit too fast or too slow or whatever, like I said, you can just put up your hand and then I'll know that I should stop. Actually, let's allocate some emojis. So it's a star if the network is bad. You can raise your hand if you have a question in the middle of the session, which is absolutely fine. I don't mind at all. I'm just putting it towards the end just to keep within our time limit. But I really, really don't mind if you guys have questions halfway through. I really don't mind. And then let's pick an emoji for in case we're going too fast. I think we can use the clapping emoji. So if I see the clapping emoji pop up, I'll know, okay, I need to slow down. Right, let's recap. Star if there's a network issue and you can't hear me. Raise your hand if you have a question halfway through, and the clapping emoji if we're going a bit too fast for you. Right. Okay. Now, like I said, you are going to be getting all of these. You will be getting the slides, so all of these words are going to be highlighted there as well. But sometimes, it's nice to write things down. You end up remembering it better when you've written it down. Okay. Now let's get into the digvorm, or the structure, right? So this poem is an Italian sonnet. An Italian sonnet has 14 lines. Usually it's an octave along with a sestet. And in the octave, there's always a problem being presented or a challenge. And then in your sestet, that is where the solution or the answer will come out. So in this case, the speaker is saying, I don't know, I don't think I'm going to listen to my heart anymore because you've led me astray and all of that. That would all be in your octave. What is an octave? A stanza that has 8 lines. Then in your sestet, we've got the sort of conclusion, right? So in this case, the speaker is not looking for an answer. They're looking for a conclusion, so a decision. Am I going to listen to my heart or am I going to listen to my mind? And in the sestet is where the speaker essentially makes that decision and decides, no, I'm definitely listening to my intellect. I'm listening to my head, right? And then just as a little bit of extra information, in Italian sonnets, because it's an octave and a sestet, there will usually be a turning point there'll usually be a turning point between line 8 and 9 because that is where the two stanzas meet, right? Now let's get deeper into it. So what is the details in terms of the octave and the sestet exactly? So in the octave, let me first highlight some words for you so that you can jot that down while I'm talking. So you will need the word discussed because you've got to say it's a discussion. You will need the word intellect. I know we've added it already, but you never know if you might have missed it. Let's be safe then, sorry. And then boldly, we definitely need, right? And then we need, we need a laugh heart, which is a coward or fool, right? Let's add that in, it can also mean fool. Okay, and then a burden, which is a las, right? And bitterness, which is bitterate. Okay, so now while you're looking at your Vodiscat words over there, in the octave, the emotions of the heart are discussed. So basically, the speaker is telling us what the heart made her do, right? And how the intellect is now critically analyzing and almost sort of blaming the heart for acting boldly, right? So the intellect is criticizing the heart, saying, you're so bold and you're acting like a fool, stop doing that. Listen to me rather, right? And then in line 8, as we saw in the Italian sonnet, there's always a little turn. That is where we see there's a sense of bitterness now. And then it's concluded that the heart is clearly a burden and sick. So sick in this case, meaning not doing well, meaning the speaker wasn't guided well by the heart. She feels let down that her heart ended up making her situation unwell. So that's the context of sick over here, right? Okay, and let's look at the sestet. Okay. In the sestet, there is now a clear distinction between the you and the I, which means the speaker is now putting the heart and the intellect on two opposite sides, meaning they are opponents, We will see that when we look at the actual lines of the poem in a minute. So there's a you and an I. So it's like we're not on the same team here. There's you doing what you want to do, and then there's I that's doing what I think we should do, right? So the heart is accused, if we look back, the heart's being accused of being bold and being a coward or a fool. So it's like the intellect is absolutely rejecting that behavior, saying, no, I don't behave like that. Which means you're wrong. And where do we see this statement in terms of where the decision is made that the heart is wrong? In the say state, because that is where the speaker comes to a conclusion and says, right, I've decided, the heart is definitely wrong. And how we see that happening in the poem is the wording actually puts them on opposite sides. It's you and I, right? Guest, host, master, ceremonies, fool, etc. We're going to look at that in a minute. Right. Now let's first do some woordeskat over here. What do we need from here? We need represents, because you're going to need to be able to say that the you represents different roles as well as the I. You would need the word, well, there we go. And then we would need guest and host. Now this you might not per se need in your answer, but when they're asking the question, they might refer to gas here. And what's essential for you to know is when are they talking about the guest and when are they talking about the host? Because both of the words have gas in it, right? So you need to know gas here is the host and guest is gas, okay? And then ceremoniemeester is your MC, right? So the master of ceremonies. And I'm actually just going to add that in there because the words we use when we speak is MC. Nobody says like master of ceremonies. Let's just put that there for you, right? Master of ceremonies. And nar, which is fool. Now, mind you, nar can also be translated as clown. See, so the intellect's like really insulting the heart here. Fool, clown, coward, etc. Yeah, you just got to know that that is what's being implied over there. Okay. Now let's get into our analyse. That's what's next, right? We're going to do the analysis. So here, what I've done for you is I've actually put each of the stanzas that we're referring to at the top. You just grab the pen. Right, this is where you're looking in terms of the lines. And the bit that we're looking at will be in blue, right? So when you're making notes, if you're adding to your mind map, so essentially this is where your mind map would most likely start. So if we're looking at line 1, line 1 will be blue, right? So to say, dis hier wat ons twee skei, jy hart en ek. Now remember what I was saying about you and I? See that distinction over there? It's already from the onset. They're talking to each other because they've separated themselves. Now you need to note that, see, their heart is in capital letters, meaning the speaker is now making it sound as if the heart is an individual, meaning it's being personified. We'll get into personification later, but I'm just explaining to you so that you understand more or less what you're looking at. So it's a capital letter because it's being personified into a person. That is why it's possible for the heart to have an opinion and for the intellect to have an opinion because they're being personified into individuals or like people. Okay, so dis hier wat ons twee skei, jy hart en ek. Now let's look at the dash. The dash here is really just telling us that there's a person, two people being mentioned. Person 1 and person 2 is what we're looking at in terms of the dash. So it's separating who is the ons twee, essentially. So now in exams, let me just give you the little tip. I was going to keep this for the end, but like we can do it now because it's in here. Okay, so in exams, how they would end up analyzing or asking you 2 different questions about this line. First of all, is they will ask who's the ons twee. Then you have to say it's the jy and the ek. In other words, the heart and the hoof of verstand. So it's the heart and the intellect. But then they can also ask you wie is die jy and die ek, and then it would be the same answer, but they're just trying to confuse you in terms of how they're asking the question. It's exactly the same answer. So who's the ons twee? You and I. And who is the jy en ek? It's the heart and the intellect, right? And when they ask you what is the purpose of the dash, this is the purpose of the dash, to emphasize the two people so that you notice that it's two separate opponents, basically. Now, where would that be? Klem te lê, which is emphasize, op die twee mense. See how they're translating it as people. It's not people, it's personified into people, right? It's the head and the heart. It's not actually people, they're being personified. Just make sure you understand that nicely, because remember we said the allegory follows through the entire poem. So when they're referring to them as people, remember that it's actually just the two entities. Okay, and then let's look at the commas. So we've got a couple of commas over here. Why are there so many commas? That's because the speaker is trying to emphasize that there's a clear separation. Now, if we talk about separation, they can ask you the different modalities of the separation. Now the question will be, how is the poet clearly making a separation between the heart and the intellect? Then you would have to say, first of all, it's the commas, right? Second of all, it's the dash. And then third of all, it is the you and the I, right? Those are the three things that clearly show us these two are not on the same team. That's a level 2 question, so that could be worth 2 marks. Not on the same team. Okay, right. Now, they've separated it in the first line. They've made such a big distinction between who's talking. Yeah, so they're really laying emphasis on that. Now, all the other beeldspraak, all the other imagery is going to feed into this vein idea that we're seeing here in line 1. Hence, I've put so much time into just elaborating on that. Let's get into it. So, is communicates. Okay, we've covered all of this. Right, let's see if we can add some more woordeskat. So, you need to know that the word dash is aandagstreep. Why? Because if you need to refer to it when they're asking the question about separation, you've got to say, the aandagstreep shows this and this and this. Or alternatively, in reverse, they could ask you, what is the doel van die aandagstreep? And then you have to know what they're talking about. So it's very important that you know your words for each of your punctuation marks. Okay, yeah, then we're going to move on to our next section. I hope that you guys are jotting down any questions that you have for each of the slides, right? So that at the end we can jump back and just have a look at all of them if we need to, anything at all. Please, 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 my kids, anything at all. No question is too small or too stupid or too insignificant. Whatever you want to ask, nobody is going to judge you for asking the question. You're here to make sure that you have full clarity on the poem and you know exactly what each and every line, what's happening in each and every line and every punctuation mark and every little capital letter, whatever it is that we're looking at, this is your opportunity. I don't want you to feel that any question is too silly or anything. I'm not going to shout you if I need to repeat myself. I'm more than happy to repeat myself 500 times if I need to, if it means that you're understanding the poem much better when you walk away from this lesson. Okay, right, let's get into line 2. So over here, we've got the word albei. Now that stands out. Let me just grab the pen. Okay, I think we can switch up colors a bit. So let's use this one. Okay, so albei over here is the most important word for line 2 because now in line 1, we made so much effort, or the poet made so much effort to distinguish between the two people that's talking. Sorry. The dash, the jy and ek, as well as the commas. But now in line 2, they're using albei, which is bringing them back together again. So now they're being referred to as a unit. See, so there's a bit of a contrast there. So in line 1, they're being separated. Line 2, they're bringing them back together again, right? Maybe we should just add something there. United, the way they're being mentioned, right? Which is really the truth of it all, because if you look at a person has both a heart as well as a mind. So it's not sensible to really separate them, because they are united in one person. Now, here they're saying, albei tot afskeid, so onvoorbereid. What does onvoorbereid mean? Unprepared. Right? Let's just translate as we go along. Okay. So, albei tot afskeid. Afskeid is to say goodbye, right? To say that they are now separating. You can definitely add this into your woordeskat. Okay, so both of us are now separating. So there is something that they are doing collectively, and that is just separating. That's the only thing they're doing together, is separating. Now, in line 2, the fact that they mentioned as a unit shows how difficult it is to separate. Because if the separation was easy, the poet would have continued using them as you and I, right? So they would have said, you and I are separating, which implies that we're already separate. We just need to now like walk away. But they used the word albei because it's difficult, right? So what would the question be? The question would be, why did the poet use the word albei? Okay, that's because they're indicating that it's really difficult for them to separate because they are united, right? That's the purpose of using albei over there. We'll get into the alliteration that we see there in a bit, but for now, you just need to know that that's the purpose of uniting them in line 2, as opposed to having them separate in line 1. Okay, then let's look at some woordeskat. So we have onvoorbereid, absolutely essential. Please add that. You have to have onvoorbereid because they are unprepared, which makes it difficult. They are not prepared to separate because they are unprepared for the separation. They're used to being united. Die weg was lieflik. Oh nee. So albei ek en jy is nie voorbereid om afskeid te neem nie. So here we're going to just add, just as a side note in your mind map if you're making one, difficult for them to separate. I think this does come up again when we do woordeskat, but that's fine. I mean, when we do beeldspraak. Okay. Right. Let's go on to line 3. So die weg was lieflik waarlangs jy gelei het. So the path that you led me on was really like loving and beautiful and things like that. So the intellect is now acknowledging, okay, fine. It's acknowledging that the heart did its best to lead the person on like a beautiful path, like rose-colored glasses, and being super happy and joyful and in love and things like that. So that's where the word lieflik comes in. Okay. So lieflik says that it was a positive experience for a bit. Like, it wasn't always negative. The speaker felt it was a positive experience, but it's ending not so good now, right? It's turning out to be not so smart for them to take this path in particular. So weg over here is path, woordeskat, right? Waarlangs jy gelei het. Who's the jy? This is a question that always comes out whenever they ask this poem in the exam. This question always comes out: who's the jy, who's the ek? Here you need to know that it's the heart. Okay, the jy is the heart. Because remember, how will you know throughout the poem? The intellect is actively rejecting the heart, and the intellect is the one that's speaking. So the ek is always the intellect. Let's just clarify for you guys. The intellect is always the ek and the ye is always the heart. The heart doesn't speak in this poem because just if they had to ask now, like maybe a level 4 question that needed you to elaborate, and they asked you, why is the heart not speaking? Why is the heart not answering? You would then have to say, because the intellect feels that, or thinks, or is saying, or the viewpoint is that the intellect is not listening to the heart anymore, which means the heart's opinion doesn't matter. That's why the heart's not getting a chance to talk here, because the intellect feels that the heart spoke enough, and this was the path that the heart had led the speaker down, right? So it wasn't the speaker used all of the advice that the heart gave, and look at the path that you ended up on. So now the intellect saying, no, I'm talking now, so you just keep quiet, and that is why the heart doesn't get to talk. Okay, then let's look at Elisi. So over here, we've got an Elisi. What is the Elisi? It's this piece over here, okay? What does Elisi mean? It means when there's words or letters and phrases that are left out on purpose. That's what Elisi is. And in this case, they left out a whole piece of word, which is het, right? So this is not grammatically correct for them to say gelei. It's supposed to be gelei het. You need to know that. So we're going to highlight this. This is actually supposed to be, sorry, gelei het. Okay, and what's the purpose of the Elisi? To show, so if the word has been shortened, and what is the word? The word is lead, right? Let's actually just translate it for you. So the heart has led you down this nice path, but now it's coming to an end, right? Gelei het, they cut the word lead short because they're trying to say that the intellect is now cutting the commentary of the heart short. Like this is where you leading the show is ending. Let me add that for you guys over at the bottom, right? So the leadership of the heart is ending. Yeah. So it's sort of final. It's very like chopping the heart off halfway, like no, stop now, right? That's why we're using an Elisi. Leadership of the heart ends here. And it's a bit abrupt. Right? It came to an abrupt ending, and that's why the Elisi was used to show how abrupt the ending is. It's the intellect that has now put a stop to the heart's opinion and leadership. Okay. Let's get into line 4. So, maar dis verby, al staar jy terug, nou strek. Okay, first thing we notice, there's an enjambment happening here. Where's the enjambment? With the word maar. Okay, so that means line 3 and 4 is definitely connected because of that enjambment over there. And why? Because this sentence is just continuing, but it's a completely different opinion. If we look at line 3, it says, the path that you led me was so lovely or so caring and so loving, and thank you for leading me, right? Lieflik. That's how we know. But, which is maar, but it's over now. See, so verby links directly with the Elisi over here because it's saying it's over and it stops right here. It's an abrupt ending. Let's actually translate and add that to woordeskat. Okay, verby is over. You need that word, right? So that you can say what's happening. And then, what else do we need from here? Okay, wending. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that word. Wending is really just a turning point. Where's the turning point? Over here, they're saying, okay, the path was so lovely and nice. And then they're saying, but it's over now. Right? That's your wending. Okay? These are your two contrasting ideas. Like I said, I didn't want to write too many things on the slides. You guys are more than welcome to just add that into your mind map or whatever. This is basically the contrast. Let's write it like this. Oopsie. Let's just go back. Oh, what's happening? Just jumped. Okay. So where were we? Yeah, right. It's a contrast. So this is basically your contrast is your vending. That's your turning point. Okay. So there's now officially an opinion. What is the intellect saying? It's over, right? That's your vending. So maar dis verby, but it's over now. Al staar jy terug. Once again, who's the yay? The yay is the heart, right? Even though you're looking at me, you're still here staring at me. I want you to know that it's over, right? And you're not carrying on with your leadership. Then they do another enjambment, no stack, but we're going to look at that in the next line. So it says, maar dis verby, al staar jy terug. So you see the word al. So the word al is saying that, like, I'm decided. There's no indecisiveness. Okay. So the word al says even though. So it's almost like the intellect is saying to the heart, it doesn't matter what you do. I've already decided. See, that finality once again is highlighted when we look at the elisi that was used before. That's how we knew that, here comes some finality. Now the word al is just highlighting that even further, saying that yes, it's over now. Even if you're staring back at me, it doesn't matter. Your time is over. Okay, now let's look at the next slide. Let's first see, is there any other words we need to add here? No, I think you guys are fine. We have gelei. I know that was highlighted previously, but just to make sure you guys are absolutely up to scratch. This is your lead, right? Lead. Right, lead. Okay, you need to translate that. Okay. Then we've got the next stanza or next line. So die pad langs klove. Now, if we look at the previous line, it ends with no strak, right? And then there's an enjambment into line 5. No strak die pad langs klove. What does strak mean? Strak means to stretch. So the past is now stretching. Okay, let me actually just get back to this quickly. So the poet's using the word strak because if we look at line 3, the path was so lovely, and you know that when something is good and happy and joyful and loving and all of that, we don't feel, oopsie, I just spelled it like that. Okay, we don't feel the time passing, we don't feel the path. Just imagine yourself on a journey and you've got to take a walk to the shop or whatever, and you're so excited to just go and get yourself a chocolate or whatever, and you're just taking a little walk. And you don't mind the distance, you don't feel it because you're excited to where it ends, right? But if you know that you're maybe taking a walk to, I don't know, let's make a bad example, it's fine, right? Let's say you're walking to detention, okay? And now your mom says, I'm punishing you as well. I'm not even going to drop you off because you're so naughty. You got to walk to school to go for your detention. Why are you even in detention? When you're walking, imagine the feeling. The feeling is like you're dragging your feet and you don't want to go. And you know that now you're going to sit there for hours and it's going to be so boring. And you're going to be in an environment where everyone's going to be unhappy and things like that and quiet and whatever, right? As opposed to, taking a little journey to go and get a chocolate, right? So see the contrasting image in your mind. That is why they used the word strak. So previously the path was nice and joyful and everything. They didn't feel the stretch. But now, see, they're bringing us into the now. Now that what? Now that what happened? Now that the intellect has shoved the heart's opinion aside and the heart's not leading anymore, now that this path is looking a bit long and sad. So they say, no strak die pad langs klove. Okay. Based on the whole feeling that you just have gotten by imagining that, the poet is now actually painting a picture for you, right? And how the poet does that is by using these words, right? We've got klove, afgrond and moeras, right? So it's canyons and cliffs and downhills and uphills, and that is what's happening here, right? So the poet is now describing how horrible this path is by saying there's going to be, so these words collectively, they are just describing a difficult terrain. So perhaps when the heart was leading, the path looked very smooth, and now it's looking not so nice, right? Clover literally is, clover is like ditches and trenches and things like that. And then afgrond is, you know, going downhill, or it can also mean backdrop. But if we had to take it as backdrop, it would mean looking at the path from a distance and feeling that this is going to be really difficult. And yeah, so, oh, and moeras is like a lot of complications. So it's complex, like maybe just to give you a visual, walking through bushes and trying to navigate and find your way through all the chaos of leaves and trees and whatever, right? So all you need to know is that those 3 words are basically describing what this path looks like now, as opposed to the smooth path before. Right, now let's look at the enjambment. So it says line 4 flows into line 5, which we discussed, without the use of punctuation, which makes it an enjambment. That's how we know it's an enjambment. And what does that do for us? It gives us unity, right? So it just joins it. You need the word for unity, because if they ask you what does it do, you need to be able to say that. And then I want you to also just have the word for separation, which is skeiding. I know we added this before, but I'm just making sure. And then we have the word for difficult already, which is moeilijk. That's for your woordeskat. And if you want to say the idea, now that's not in the English bit, but I'm going to give this to you anyway in Afrikaans, because sometimes we want to say the idea that the poet is creating. Then you can use the word gedachte. How would you use that? You'd say the idea that's being created here is XYZ, right? So it's a nice little word to have when you're talking about any poem, because all poems are introducing ideas. So this woordeskat that you're building could potentially spill over into how you end up handling other poems in finals as well. So we're just going to be a bit extra in terms of the woordeskat. Okay. Let's go on to, let me just have a look. Okay. Let's go on to line 6, 7, and 8. So I've combined line 6, 7, and 8 because the meaning is united. So it says voortvarend en 'n lafaard soos altyd en nooit in staat tot enige besluit. So voortvarend is, you know, being bold and taking risks and things like that. Let's actually add that in there for you guys. This is risky behavior, okay? So voortvarend is bold, risky. Now we added voortvarend already, so I'm just going to add that you can also interpret it as risky behavior. In 'n lafaard, which is a coward, or a fool, which we've translated. Soos altyd, as always. Who are we talking about here? The heart, right? En nooit in staat tot enige besluit. You are never making a fixed decision, right? That's what nooit in staat tot enige besluit. You're not making fixed decisions. You are just going with the flow, right? That's what the poet's trying to say here. The heart just keeps going with the flow. Like no structure, okay? The heart's not taking structured decisions, okay? Nooit in staat tot enige besluit. En siek daarbey is jy nou net te las. And along with not taking any decisions, you've now made yourself sick, right? Because we're now on an unhappy path. Daarbey is jy nou net te las, and you're just a burden now, okay? This is burden, right? Okay. And now you're just a burden, because now what happens is the intellect is saying, look, you've taken us on this path and you didn't make any structured decisions, and now we're not well. what the word sick. Now we're not well, and now you're just a burden because you're just complicating everything, and now I have to fix it. Who's I? The intellect. So the intellect now has to fix what the heart has created, all the chaos. Where's the chaos? Up here. Oopsie. There we go. That's the chaos we're talking about. The heart has created a chaotic path that the intellect now has to try and solve, and all of this, right? So yeah, the yellow is really just saying exactly what I just said. But if you feel you want the word for hasty, we can definitely add that, right? Haaste, to say that the heart took decision hastily, that's fine. And without thinking about it, you need the word without, okay? Because you got to be able to say without thinking. Sorry, and then the heart is compared to a coward. We added compared already. I'm just highlighting it just in case you missed it the first time. Compared to. And then, now remember from our Italian sonnets slide, right? Where we said in line 8, there's going to be like this weird little conclusion or turning point, maybe a vending or whatever happening. Okay, where do we see that? It's true to this poem as well. Let me change colors because I don't want it to get lost. We can do red, blue. Okay. We see it with this right here. Okay, tells us there's a conclusion. So what's the conclusion? It's just, oh, this color is like going, it's just blending. Okay, whatever, we'll switch it in a bit. Okay, this is the conclusion. So, as jy nou net te laat, okay, in conclusion, you are now a burden. So it's been decided. Who decided? The intellect decided. In line 8. Okay, so the intellect has now come to a conclusion in line 8, and it said, no, now I'm sure, after looking at all of this chaos and things that you've created, I acknowledge that you led us on a nice path and all of that, and it was fun. But now we have chaos. There's things that are not right. So I've officially decided you are now a burden. That's the conclusion. That's our turning point. Notice the word in. Okay. This is your vending right here. It's telling you. So far we got 2 points for vending. We got mod and in, right? Mod in line, I think 3, line 4. Mod in line 4, and then we've got 1 over here. So there's your vending. Let's continue. Any other word is cut here? No, we added bitterness. Okay, let's look at line 9 and 10. So, jy was die gas en gasheer by die feest. So you were the guest as well as the host at the feast, right? You were the MC and you were the clown. So you see, they translated clown initially as fool, but it can also be translated as clown, because when you think of guests and hosts and MCs and things like that, obviously there has to be some form of entertainment. So the intellect is now saying your journey was very entertaining as well. Like, we had fun while it lasted. That's basically what the intellect is saying. Yeah, I wanted to just switch colors. It's to green. So clown was the entertainment. Okay. So it was fun while it lasted. That's actually what the intellect is saying. Okay. So jy was die gas en die gasheer by die fees. So it was like a feast or a party or a festival or carnival to imply joy. Why are they using this little metaphor here? They're implying joy and happiness. Joy, fun, happiness. Now, what's the question that would come out of here? It's a level 1 question. It'll be very easy. They'll just ask you, why do you think the poet decided to use the concept of a event where there's like guests and a clown and a MC and things like that? Why? Because it shows it was like a celebration, like it was happiness, to give that idea. That's why they decided to go with this metaphor. Okay. I'm going to add this in for you guys just in case. Why this metaphor? You need to be able to answer that. There's about 3 or 4 different questions they can ask just about that. I'll see if I can maybe send you guys some questions as well that you can just study with some answers and things like that. Okay, then contradiction. Okay, so guest and host, how is this a contradiction? Because how can you be hosting an event and you're attending the event as well? So are you the host or are you the guest? Right? You got to pick one. You can't be both. Right? But in this case, because the heart is so unstructured and irresponsible almost, and bold and acting foolish and things like that, it's like it switched between being the guest and the host. So it didn't have a defined role, it didn't have a plan, as well as master of ceremonies and the clown or the fool. And each of these are being used as a metaphor to imply emotions. Now, like I said, what emotions? We're talking about joy, fun, happiness, being free and not having to really think before you're acting. Like it's just one big fun celebration, right? And that is how this metaphor explains the emotions that the person was experiencing when the heart led. Let me add that for you. This was the experience. Whose experience? The speaker. Or the person rather, because the speaker is actually the intellect. So it's the person whose intellect and heart is being questioned here. So the person's experience. When she was led. Because remember, she's female. She was led by the heart. Okay. Right. And then we see a little colon over there. What's the purpose of the colon? They always ask that. So it's really just to tell you that an explanation is about to follow. Now, we have a statement here. The statement is it was joyous, it was happy, it was a celebratory time, we were free and flowing and all of this. So now the colon's telling you, okay, let me elaborate on that. Let me explain what I mean, right? I'm actually just going to highlight it in the actual notes because we don't want to crowd it with writing. So the colon, you need to have this in your mind map if you're making one. Right. Okay. So the function of the colon, you need to know the word colon. Please make sure that is in your people's notes so that you can reference it when you're talking. And then you also need the word verduideliking, which is explanation, right? So that you can elaborate and use your knowledge nicely. Okay. Yeah. Let's go on to the next slide. So, jou dwaase raad, okay, kan net die hoof verwar. Okay, so dwaase. We have to translate that. Dwaase can be translated as stupid and foolish. Oopsie. Foolish, even uninformed. Oh, what am I writing? Thinking in Afrikaans, talking in English. Okay, uninformed. Okay, there we go. Right? So, dwaase is to say it was so stupid and so foolish and you didn't give me proper advice. Right? Raad is advice. Okay, you need to know that. Kan net die hoof verwar. Okay, verwar, we need to translate. Confuse. Now, I want you to note this is the first time in line 11 where the intellect is being referenced with a title. Remember in line 1, we had heart, that was with a capital letter. Now we've got worth, which is the name of the intellect. So if the intellect was a person, this is what they would call the intellect, worth. What's the type of questions that would come from this? They would ask you, okay, what are the 2 names that is given to the intellect and the heart in the poem? Or they would ask you, who is the hoof, who is the heart? Those type of questions, just level 1 questions. Okay, then waar elke tree die laaste tree mag wees. And then where every step might potentially be the last step you take. Now, what is happening here is the intellect is explaining, let me go back. The intellect is explaining why they use the example of this festival where people are just having fun and there's no accountability, there's no structure. You are the guest and you are the MC and you are the clown and you're everything. There's no structure. And where has it led us now? To a point where things are so risky that every step you take could potentially end up being your last step. That's essentially what this line means. Let me translate it for you. Come on. Here we go. Right? So every step you take could be the last step. Now, what does that mean? If you're saying every step you take might be the last step, then it implies that you're not. Sorry, let me just make a brighter color. I can't see. Last important may. Let me just do all your borders quickly. This is where. And then this would obviously be each, right? Now with this borders card, you should effectively be able to translate this line. So waar elke tree die laaste tree mag wees, where every step that you take could potentially be your last step. So that gives us the idea of the risky behavior. Irresponsible, risky. I actually want to give you guys the word for irresponsible because that's an amazing word to use to explain how the heart is reacting or behaving. It just like encapsulates everything. So irresponsible is onverantwoordelik. Okay. So you can use irresponsible just as an umbrella statement if you don't want to elaborate and study all the words like foolish and uninformed and all of those. Okay, so where each step is a risk. That's basically what they're saying. Now, the enjambment is continuing for quite some time now, right? It stopped after line, what line was it? By no strack. So that whole piece was an enjambment from there onwards. From line 9, line 8, line 9, right? So the enjambment is connecting it as a whole. Why? Because remember we said with an Italian sonnet, the sestet is essentially a conclusion. So it's actually just like one giant sentence if you had to really think about it. It's one giant opinion, one giant conclusion. In stanza 1, we only had 2 enjambments because more than one opinion was being given. Sorry, but in the sestet, it's one big idea, and the idea is that the heart is stupid and it's final. The intellect is now taking over. The person has chosen. Okay. Let's see if there's any other woordeskat you need from here. Okay, we added advice. Advice is super important. You must have that, which is your raad. And we had united. Confused the head and thought. Yes, I think you're fine. Let's add thought and reason just to be safe. So we've given you 2 options there. You can use either denke or rede, and that's fine. And don't forget the word confuse because that's essentially the opinion of the intellect. You have to have confuse in your woordeskat. Okay. We've added raad and advice. Okay. I think maybe add connects as well, just in case they ask you a question where they want you to say what the purpose of the enjambment is. Dit verbind. That's your answer. Dit verbind elke reël. Word verbind deur die enjambment. Okay. right? En dan line 13 en 14. Kyk, dit word laat. Okay, die kermis is verby. What does this line mean? Look, it's getting late now. The carnival's over. Once again, we have that word carnival again, right? So just look, it's late now. Like you've used up enough time. You've spent enough time. I'm taking over now. It's the carnival, the joy, the fun, the irresponsibleness or whatever is over. Kan jy dit nie begryp? Can you not understand it? Now, I don't think I put that in here. I need to. Over here, there's supposed to be something. What's supposed to be there? Another knee. Why did they put this Elise here? Remember we said previously, Elise is really just to draw attention to that so that you look at the meaning closer. So this is a rhetorical question. Oh, I'm doing the wrong line. Sorry, guys. We're looking at line 13. Okay, we'll get there in a minute. So let's look at line 13, which is blue. So the use of the comma slows down the pace. Why is the pace being slowed down? Because the speaker is now coming to a realization where it's almost like it's sending the heart on its way. Like, okay, it's the end now. Thank you so much for coming, or whatever. You can be on your way now. So it's being gentle, but it's being firm. So they're pacing it with all of these commas because it's creating pause. And why are they creating pause? Remember in the previous line we saw, because it's difficult. The separation is not easy, it's difficult. And this is in line 13 and 14 is essentially where the separation happens. Let me note that down. This is the separation point. So I'm just putting this here for you because line 13 and 14 are definitely connected. So this is the separation point. So that's why they're pacing it with this, with all the commas, because it's like, okay, it's a slow goodbye, right? It's a slow release, slow send off. That's the purpose of the commas, to slow the pace down, because this is where the realization of the intellect happens that this is now officially where the heart will no longer be considered at all, right? So the entire poem was a whole explanation of, okay, this is what the heart did in the octave. This is what the heart did. And then the sestet was, yeah, this is how the intellect feels about it, to say, yeah, no, I don't think this is working out. This is probably what we should do. And then line 13 and 14, which is still part of your sestet, is now saying, so since I've decided that you're not good for me, goodbye. That's line 13 and 14. Okay? Remember, it's still part of the sestet, so it's actually still part of that united idea. Okay, so let's see for woordeskat. I don't know, maybe add the word use. Sometimes these small words catch us when we're writing answers and we can't remember them. Slows down. Right, verstadig. We want the word for pace because that's what the commas are doing. They're slowing down the tempo. And then die versieel is line, that's fine. And then we have realization, which is besef, to realize something. And then mind and reason we have already. Yes, I think that's all you need. And then let's add skei, because previously we had skeiding, which is separation, and skei is separate. So this is a verb form of skeiding. Okay. So if you want to say die hart en die hoof skei, this is your verb. But if you had to say there is a separation, you would use skeiding. Okay. Now, yeah, that's our woordeskat. So what's happening in line 13 and 14? They're using commas to slow the pace down because this is the final goodbye, sort of. Okay, now let's actually look at line 14 because I was getting ahead of myself over there. Let's actually look at line 14. Right? So this is a rhetorical question. Okay, meaning the heart doesn't really have to answer because the intellect's already shooing it away, like goodbye, we're done now. And then it says hier moet ons skei. This is where we need to separate. Now note the word ons. Throughout the poem, it was jy and ek, jy and ek. It was you and I. And then only one time did they say in line 2, just to go back to line 2 for you, that was the only other place where it was mentioned, where they were mentioned as a united front. let's just look at that. I need you to add that in your mind map if you're adding it, if you're making a mind map. Line 2 was the only place where they said albei, right? The rest of the poem, so the poem has 14 lines, but only in 2 lines was the heart and the intellect actually united per se, right? They were not united except for line 2 and line 14. Now, how would this come out as a question? They would actually just ask you, in which lines is the intellect and the heart actually being referred to as a unit? And then you need to say line 2 and 14. Let me just go back to this slide. Here we go. Okay. So this is, I'm going to actually make that note for you. Line 2 and 14. I'm going to put the proper title so you guys get used to that when you're studying. Hoof en hart is the names of the people. Remember, they're being personified as people. United. Okay. And then it's a rhetorical question. Oopsie. Now, let's quickly have a look at woordeskat. Is there anything here? No. Retorische vraag. I don't know if you guys want to add that, but let's highlight it anyway. Right? Rhetorical question. Okay. That's all you really need there. Okay. Now, like I said, the last 2 lines is really emphasizing the speaker's final decision. Okay, who's the speaker? Intellect. You need to know that is what makes these 2 special. It's the last 2 lines of the second stanza of the sestet. That's where the final decision is made. Now we're going to have a look at beeldspraak. Okay. I'm thinking maybe we should just have a quick pause and see if you guys have any questions on this section. Or should we keep it for the end? Does anyone have any questions up until this point before we get into beeldspraak? Because that's also a little detailed section. If you do, you're just more than welcome to just unmute your mic and you can just ask me. Okay, so then if there's no questions, remember you can jot them down and ask them at the end. Okay, we're gonna go into, should we do the woordskap now? Yes, okay, let's do the woordskap at the end, along with the theme. Right, let's get into the beeldspraak. So beeldspraak in styl vergeer, so image and style. So we're gonna zoom through the metaphors. We're gonna get through the LEC quickly. Personifications, assonance, and alliteration. That's what we're doing now, right? Okay. First thing you need to know, of course, is that stanza 2 is an extended enjambment. It carries on because it's one big idea. But let's get into line 1. So this hier vat ons to skei. It's here where we separate. The 2 of us separate. You, the heart, and me, which is the intellect. What's the personification here? So a lot of this, guys, I've already said, but I'm going to go over it again just so that you densen up your notes. Okay, so this section's going to be quick. It won't be as slow as what we just did because I mentioned most of this already. Okay. So personification, the heart is being mentioned as a person, the intellect's being mentioned as a person. What do you need to know? I'm actually going to use the highlighter for this one. You need to know that that's the purpose of the capitalization. Oh no, this doesn't. Let's just stick to our pen. Okay, the fact that it's capitalized is how you know that it's being personified. There's no other clue here. It's really just the capital. And then it's being humanized. You need to add to your woordeskat vermenslik. Because sometimes when they ask you, how is it being personified, it can get a little bit complicated when you're trying to, in Afrikaans, say that the object or whatever is being given human qualities. To say that in Afrikaans as a sentence can sometimes be challenging. So make sure you got your woordeskat. Right? So jy kan net sê die hart word personifieer, die hart word vermenslik. Right? So that's a complete answer right there. This right here is a complete answer. So that to ask you, why is it in capital letters? That's literally the answer. Okay? And obviously the same for the intellect as well. If they ask you hoekom is hoof in hoofletters, you can say, oopsie, I need to just focus on charge. Okay. You would then say that die hoof word personifieer of vermenslik. So you just pick a word, it's either or, either personifieer or vermenslik. They both mean humanized. Okay. So that is your personification. Then if you look at line 2, which is albei tot afskeid, so onvoorbereid. Both of us have gotten to a point of separation and we're so unprepared, right? There's assonance over here, the repetition of, let's just highlight it, of the A sound. What's the point of this? Remember when I explained in your analysis line 2, I said it's difficult. So the assonance here is emphasizing how difficult it is, how difficult the separation is. There we go. Right, so what's the function? This is basically the function of the assonance. They like to ask those questions and then we sit there and we think, so what do they mean? Like, it's a double A. What's the function? So the function is to emphasize how difficult it is that the heart and the intellect is now separating, okay? And then you need obviously the word herhaling, because how would you say repetition? Herhaling. I want to give you the verb form as well, so that you can say it's being repeated, which is herhaal. Please add to your woordeskat. So herhaal is to repeat. This is the verb form of herhaling, right? So yes, so the double A is really just emphasizing that this is a tough decision. Okay. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else. No, that's good. Okay. Then we've got line 3, die weg was lieflik waar langs jy gelei het. That which you led me on was lovely or loving or nice or beautiful, whichever words you end up going with. Gelei het was our Lisi, where we said that it was abruptly brought to an end because there was chaos being caused by the heart not being structured in its decision making. Where is our alliteration? Let's just highlight it. Right, that's our alliteration. And then we've got our Elise over there, which we know about. We've highlighted this before, but this is where it would fall under actually beeldspraak. So gelei het, it's the abrupt ending. And what is the function of this alliteration? To emphasize that the path was so frivolous, right? Like it was such a unstructured way of behaving, because the intellect is accusing the heart of acting like a fool and being bold and things like this. So it's emphasizing the foolish behavior. Okay, the foolish behavior decisions of the heart. So it actually makes me think of the word vandal in Afrikaans, if I had to really get into it, which means to sort of just like frolic around, like you don't have anywhere in particular that you're going, you're just walking, right? And you're just like hopping and jumping and you're so happy, but you don't know where you're going, right? So that's kind of the idea here. Now, I would hope that you guys have sufficient woordeskat to be able to say this. Let me see. Emphasizing foolish behavior. So, I think you do. Emphasizing would be beklemtoon. Let me see if I need to give you woordeskat for this. So, beklemtoon, you got to be able to say what I'm saying. If you are not able to say what I'm writing in the pink, then that means your woordeskat is not sufficient because those are your answers, right? So, beklemtoon is emphasize, and then foolish we said is dwaas or dwaasa, right? And then we said behavior is, what word did they use for behavior? What was it? Okay, I'll give you this later because essentially that's what the intellect's talking about, which is decisions. So this is the decisions. I think we did add on behavior because it's being personified. So it's not really taking behavior, it's more decisions really. So dwaasa was foolish and beklemtoon was emphasize. But I'm sure you guys know beklemtoon. All my grade 12s know to beklemtoon. Emphasize. You guys love using that one, so go ahead and use it there. It's perfect here. So beklemtoon, dwaasa, and beslater. There we go. Now remember in your questions, if you are making notes for questions, note that if there's certain words also that you want, I'm happy to translate it for you on the spot. You don't need to go and use your dictionary or whatever. If there's any words that come up that you feel you need to know to elaborate on something, note it down. Okay. Then we've got alliterasie herhaling van die weerklank. We've got elision. Okay, then we're good. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So reël 9. Jy was die gas en gasheer by die fees. Okay, over here, it's exactly the same as the previous alliteration. Okay, what was chaotic decision taking? Right? The chaotic journey that the heart was actually putting the person under. So it's emphasizing once again. I'm just going to put it here for you guys just in case. Emphasis on foolishness, foolish decisions. Or lack of structure. Okay. And then, yes, it's repetition of the G sound. Okay. Now, I want to just, so we're done with beeldspraak. I want to go back to boodskap now. Right, so boodskap, what is the message of this? It's really just a truth that basically at any given time when we're taking decisions, we are always going to have to listen to either our heart or our intellect. That is the fundamental message of the poem, okay? So you can summarize that in any way that you need to. However, I always encourage you, take your woordeskat down and try and create a sentence for yourself when you're doing your mind map, so you study the answer just like that. Now, my answer is pretty long, but if you wanted to, you could literally just memorize this, but that's literally the message, okay? So it says, die boodskap is met die tema verweef. Dit is die universele waarheid dat 'n mens besluite moet neem met jou verstand of jou hart. Now, when you're studying this, you could potentially leave this bit out. You don't need to mention that because that's mentioned again in the theme when we talk about the theme. So in the slide, I've separated theme and message, but because they're intertwined, they basically can go together. So this bit that I've underlined for you, you can leave out if you decide to just use, if you decide to just use this as your answer, you can definitely do that. If they ask you what is the boodskap, they always ask at any poem, they always ask what is the tema, what is the boodskap. Just memorize this exactly the way it is, you'll be fine without the pink bits. Okay, now just to recap, what is the message? The fact that we need to either use our head or our heart to make a decision in life. Okay, then the theme, like we said, the theme is intertwined with the message. So the theme is really just an inner crisis that you experience as a person when you have to choose, do I listen to my heart or to my head, right? See how the theme and the boodskap, die thema en die boodskap is intertwined, right? Which creates an internal crisis, of course, which is innerlijke conflict or innerlijke crisis, per se. Yeah. So it's talking, the theme is really just about the inner crisis. You need to have this word. That's what you need, right? Between what? Between the heart and the mind. Okay, so if you had to study it, that's your two words, that's your two phrases that you would need. You'd say, die tema is die innerlijke krisis tussen die hart en die verstand. Okay. And like I said, you can literally study this exactly like this because these questions always come out. For any poem, they have to ask you what is the theme and the message. So you can just take it like that. And then, that's tema. We're going to go to twin. Where's twin? Yeah, right? So what is twin? Twin is the tone at which the poem is basically being spoken, like the tone of the speaker. What do you feel reading it? Or do you feel like a happy energy sort of coming at you? Or is it more of a sadness or what? But the tone is essentially what, or are they sad, happy, whatever. In this case, we have a somber or dark tone because there's a separation being anticipated, essentially. So it's like very serious and very like not enthusiastic, not joyful by any means. It's very firm and very somber. So that's where we're using the word somber to say it's so serious and, it's like a bad ending is being predicted. And that's what makes it dark as opposed to somber. What do you need to do? You just need to know either one of them. You don't even need to really, if you end up forgetting one of them, you'll still get the mark. But I would advise just know both of them. So the tone is somber. If they ask you why, because a separation is being anticipated, right? Between reason and emotion. So between head, intellect, and heart. And then the tone is let's see if we can, yeah, this answer is complete. You can memorize this like this if you want to, right? Die toon is somber donker omdat skeiding tussen rede en emosies aangespreek word. So why is the tone so somber? Because there's a separation happening between reason and emotion. So this is a complete answer as well. You can just memorize the tone like that. Let's go look at the mood. Okay. I'm sure you guys are shifting in your seats already, but we're almost done. Just another 5 minutes and we're done. Not even. Okay, let's look at stemming. So stemming, like I said, people, you have to know the word for stemming. Stemming is not a word that you can just guess. It sounds like voice because stem is voice, but it's not something you can guess. So when they ask you what is die stemming, you're going to skip past tema, boodskap, toon, and you're going to go straight to mood. What's the mood? The mood is really just what is the impression of the emotions that you get as the reader. So what did we say here? The mood reflects initial confusion. Okay, so what confusion? Because the speaker doesn't know, do I listen to my intellect or my heart? So the first section of the poem is basically just trying to figure out the tone is where they're just confused. And then in the ses state, it becomes decisive. That's what you need to know. You got to know that. Let me see if I can highlight that for you. Initial confusion. This is the octave. Okay, and the decisive choice happens in the ses state. So the mood changes essentially from initial confusion to a decisive choice, and you hear that in the tone. The tone becomes very final in the ses state. Now let me just read what it says here. So the mood reflects the initial confusion experienced by the speaker with decisions made with her heart instead of the intellect, and then the speaker makes a decisive choice and chooses the intellect over her emotions. What's the bit that really needs to stand out to you? This bit. The fact that she makes a choice, right? She makes a choice and she then chooses the intellect. Now let's do woordeskat here because there's definitely going to be woordeskat here. Stemming, we said, or mood. And then initial confusion, you need that. Okay, you don't necessarily need the word initial, but if you feel like just having your answers a bit more complete, you can use aanvanklike, but you can just say aan die begin, you know, confusion aan die begin. It doesn't have to be these big words. Make it easy for yourself. And then decisions, we need to have this later. Okay. En dan neem die spreker 'n besliste besluit en kies haar verstand. So a besliste is definitive, which is, let me see, where is it? Is it up here? Yes, it is decisive, right? And then en kies haar verstandrede bo haar emosies. Okay, so above or over. Okay, right. Let's just go and look and see if there's any other. Yeah, I think, did I add woordeskat here? Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, I think we're good. I think we're good with the woordeskat. Let me just see. Plaas van. Oh, and plaas van. Please add and plaas van. This is a word that can really help. So that's instead of. Instead of. Okay. Right. Um, okay, guys. Right. So now, is there any slide that you guys would like me to go back to and just recover before we end our session? Now would be the opportunity for you to just tell me also questions we can do. If there's a specific part that you'd like me to just recap or revise, now would be the chance for you to just get that